It was a gloomy evening when David, usually a calm and level-headed man, began to feel an unsettling unease. He lived in an old, secluded house on the outskirts of town, along with his daughter Emily. But in the past few days, something strange had started to happen. David was strolling through his house and, casually noticing his reflection in the mirror, turned around to check something in the kitchen. But something in his reflection made him freeze. He saw the reflection of his wife, Lauren, standing next to him. Lauren, who had disappeared from his life 13 years ago. David was puzzled. He turned away from the mirror and looked again, but Lauren was gone. He thought it might have been a hallucination, a result of his stress and pressure at work. But the more time passed, the more often he noticed her reflection, more and more frequently. Soon strange things began happening all over the house. Doors would open on their own, things would move from place to place, and David started hearing whispers and seeing shadows that seemed to follow him everywhere. He began to doubt his sanity, but deep down, he knew that something was indeed not right. One day, returning from work, David discovered that his daughter, Emily, hadn't returned from school. Panic gripped his heart, and he immediately started searching the surroundings, calling out her name. But there was no trace of her anywhere. After 3 long sleepless days, David was full of despair. Sitting in the living room, he stared at the mirror opposite him. And in that moment, as his gaze settled on his reflection, his heart stopped. There, together with Lauren, he saw his daughter. Emily stood next to her mother, her eyes empty, her face cold as stone. David felt a dreadful sensation flood his body. He realized that his family was in danger, that something was happening to them, something sinister and inexplicable. The force now controlling his home was deeper and darker than he had ever imagined. From then on, David no longer saw his family, but every time he looked in the mirror, he saw their reflections, standing there together. He realized they were ensnared by a force that brought them nothing but suffering and horror. And he knew he had to find a way to free them before it was too late. David stood before the mirror, his breath caught, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. He was trapped in his own fear, but he knew he had to act. His daughter and his wife were somewhere nearby, and he couldn't afford to lose hope. He began to explore the house, searching for answers to questions that seemed unanswerable. In the depths of his old home, he found ancient artifacts, among them books on mysticism and the occult. In his hands was a volume, its cover adorned with the image of a strange creature with monstrous eyes. David studied the pages of the book intently, trying to find some clues or instructions that could help him understand what was happening. Soon he came across a chapter dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of reflections and the influence of shadows on the world of the living. The more he read, the clearer it became that his house was a place where 2 worlds converged. The world of the living and the world of shadows. And in this place, where the boundaries between reality and illusion were blurred, the most terrifying events could occur. However, instead of sinking into despair, David felt a spark of hope. He realized that to save his family, he needed to confront this dark force. He gathered all his strength and determination and began to prepare for battle. He studied ancient rituals and incantations, constructed protective amulets, and searched for weak points in the defense of his home. Every day he spent hours studying magic and mysticism, hoping to find the key to freeing his loved ones. But time passed, and his daughter and wife remained trapped in the shadows. David began to lose hope, but he couldn't give up. He knew that if he lost faith, he would lose everything. One day, deeply immersed in meditation, he heard whispers from the darkness. It was the voice of his wife, calling out to him for help. The force that held them captive had weakened, and he had to seize this moment. David gathered all his amulets and incantations and set out to find his family. He ventured into the depths of his home, where shadows danced on the walls and mirrors distorted reality. In the end, he found his daughter and wife, ensnared in the embrace of darkness. The force that held them was powerful, but David was not about to give up. With his last ounce of strength, he cast the spell he had studied for so long and banished the darkness from his home. As the shadows dissipated, David embraced his family, realizing that he had triumphed. They were free, and now they could begin a new life, free from fear and horror. But he knew that in this world there was always something sinister lurking in the shadows, ready to return at any moment. And he was prepared for it, for now he knew that love and willpower could overcome any evil.